We already had cool, inspiring videos about the upcoming era of space discovery, the time when humans will be mining asteroids for precious metals, setting up pit stops on the moon for refueling, or stumbling upon helium-3, the super element that can power up entire cities. These videos got us all starry-eyed with dreams of progress, a bright, optimistic future, but, well, they were mostly childlike and naive. But hold up, we purposefully glossed over one tiny detail, the fact that people love to bicker and fight, especially when resources and power are at stake. In this video, let's dive deep into how countries today are dead serious about the space race. The fact is that it's not about who's setting foot on the moon, again, and using the same old PR tricks in the news headlines. The real deal is establishing spheres of influence in new, uncharted territories. Well, we were all dreamers in the previous vids, now we're going for something more pragmatic. Congratulations everyone, we've finally reached a stage where we can get real about geopolitics in space. For me, the first clue that humanity was about to set up its permanent presence in space was in 2019, when Donald Trump gave the green light to the Space Force. Yeah, Space Force sounds like it's straight out of a 90s sci-fi movie where you beat mutant alien cockroaches. But no, it's real. The US president set up the whole institution, which is, and this is something important to note, a part of the Department of Defense. And what's the big deal? The UK, Russia, China, and even Iran have their own versions. The thing is that the Space Force is independent, not a part of the military unit. The US made it into their own branch within the Department of Defense. Russia also separated its Space Force into a separate branch of the military forces first as early as 1992, then disbanded and recreated it in 2001, and in 2015 merged with the Air Force. Now, you can go ahead and check out the US Defense website. The Space Force is one of the 6 US military forces, right between the Air Force and the Coast Guard. Special status, you know. Oh, and while we're on their website, check out their background. It practically shouts, "Our troops are everywhere." But let's focus on the Space Warriors. They're real, and that's already news. They even came up with a hype name. Check it out. There are soldiers in the army, pilots in the Air Force, border guards in the border squad, and here we got Guardians. Not of the galaxy, not yet. They've got a logo, a uniform, and a Latin motto, Semper Supra, meaning always higher. They even have their own march. It may sound shitty at first, but then it's like a blast from the past, making you feel like all those sci-fi plots from the last century are coming to life. Now, what do these Guardians actually do? The Ministry of Defense says that they organize, train, and gear up space fighters to keep that military advantage in space. And when you ask the Space Force about their mission, they hit you with this. Space has become essential to our security and prosperity, so much so that we need a branch of our military dedicated to its defense, just like we have branches of the military dedicated to protecting and securing the air, land, and sea. Unfettered access to space is vital to national defense. Space systems are woven into the fabric of our way of life. Space affects almost every part of our daily lives and is fundamental to our economic system. For example, satellites not only power the GPS technology that we use daily, but allow us to surf the web and call our friends, enable first responders to communicate with each other in times of crisis, timestamp transactions in the world financial market, and even allow us to use credit cards at gas pumps. In short, satellite space is getting too crowded, so the Guardians need to protect their spot and keep out strangers. The US is throwing serious cash at this, $25 billion for 8,500 Guardians. Let's put it into perspective. Compare the 2024 budgets for the US Space Force and the US Navy. Space Force, 9,600 Guardians. Budget, $30 billion. US Navy 614,700 soldiers, budget $255.8 billion. Break it down per person and the difference slaps you in the face. Compared to any other service, it's colossal. Check out the 2022 defense budgets of other countries with the American Space Force. It's like 10% of China's whole defense budget, 37% of India, 41% of Russia, 42% of Britain, 53% of France, and 441% of Iran. The global idea is something like this. Earth's here. There are satellites circling around, keeping tabs on what's happening on the ground. Missile attack alerts set and all sorts of valuable payload meeting the country's national interests sent into orbit. So it'd be great to have unrestricted access to all these moves, teaming up with the right players, cutting ties with the wrong ones. And here's the hint. Outer space has been divvied up for ages. It's just now we got the tech to make it happen, shifting from theory to reality. The outer space chessboard has been set, and the game is on. Alright, let's rewind the clock to 1967 when 100 countries got together and signed an agreement about exploring and exploiting outer space. That was the first attempt to split it up. At that time, the whole world, practically being naive and unspoiled, agreed on the idea that no one should own space but only share equal access. No weapons, no military bases, just peace, friendship and cooperation. Sounds sweet, right? But, and this is a big but, the agreement was all for the good and against anything bad, outlining the main principles, giving no specifics. It didn't lay out any plan of splitting the moon, as the world was not ready yet for the moon exploration. And the fact that most countries signed should tell you a lot. Fast forward to 1979, the UN steps in and suggests clarifying things a bit. Alright, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to explore the moon altogether and decide on who owns what. Here's the deal. The moon and its resources are humanity's shared treasure, no ownership of the surface, and if a country builds a base there, it doesn't mean they're going to own the land. All states need to give heads up to the UN Secretary-General, that's me, and to the rest of the states, spill the beans on their expeditions, the when, with what gear, in what orbit, and what they're after. Share the results, and if you find some scientific gold, spread the wealth. Oh, and don't forget to double-check everything with the UN, again, me, beforehand. It's all about transparency, folks, and if someone smells fishy business, they can report it, get the UN involved, and see what's cooking. No building fences to block others, and if some state finds something valuable up there, it's not theirs to own, it's for everyone to share. Samples, equipment, personnel, it's best to share everything. In a nutshell, the UN pitched global socialism for the moon, where even the less advanced nations could get a piece without setting their foot there. Social justice game, with the UN playing referee. And who's watched the Expanse series? Hit the like button. Well, as you might guess, the United States did not support that. Yeah, typical capitalists, bourgeois, right? Hold on, folks. Socialism might sound good on paper, but turns out nobody's keen on sharing their lunar loot, especially with the less advanced. That's not how the world works. And look again at how many countries signed the 1967 agreement versus the 1979 detailed version. Even the Soviet Union of socialist republics wasn't buying socialism on the moon. In the real world, the driver for achievements is a reward you don't want to split. Maybe you'll do some bargaining, but that's it. And now it's time to talk about one particular country, starting some cosmic NATO out there. In the last video, we've discussed the Artemis project. They say the Americans are heading to the moon, checking out the South Pole and setting up a lunar base. And guess what? Artemis is not just a project, but a whole program. A project represents a single, focused endeavor to deliver a tangible output or a specific result. Projects are temporary and they close once finished. A program refers to multiple projects which are managed and delivered as a single package, aiming at maximum benefits, which is impossible to achieve if managing projects separately. Like, Russia's been running the authoritarian power program for more than 2 decades, launching projects every year, reducing freedoms, tightening control, abolishing the direct elections of cities' mayors, messing with the Russia's constitution, and much more. We, regular folks, got hygiene programs with brushing teeth as a project. Artemis is just like that, but on a cosmic level. It is not just one-off missions, but a series of linked projects. It kicked off last year with the Orion ship launch, and there's more coming in 2025 for lunar exploration, then mining on the moon, and finally a lunar base. It's all connected, part of one big program. But Artemis isn't just launches and moon bases. It's also about negotiating who gets what in outer space. And if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the Artemis program started even earlier. And here's where the Accords of Artemis come in. What are these Accords, and what's with the music reference? Reptilian humanoids could be into some pretentious names, who knows? The Accords of Artemis are a convention proposing the rules for outer space use. Well, let me explain. Remember the UN Treaty from 1967 and the detailed but unsigned 1979 agreement? In 2020, the US comes in and says, "We're not signing the UN Treaty. Let's make our own, and let's give it a populist name. Principles for cooperation in the civil exploration and use of the moon, Mars, comets and asteroids. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely for peaceful purposes." Awesome, let's make this group a VIP circle. We share data with the public, but the circle members decide what's worth sharing. We'll still proactively exchange info among ourselves, but here we'll add something new. Private sector work in space doesn't have to follow the sharing rule. And who's been backing Musk, pushing the private space industry, encouraging Bezos and Branson? Which country is this? But hey, enough with silly jokes, I just hope you get it, especially the long-term plans the reptilian elite has for us. Some could have thought that those guys were in it to develop SpaceX. Well, turns out space colonization has probably been the main goal all along. And who else could brag about its private sector space industry? Yeah, 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Jeez. Get lost, dude. I have something else to add here. Let's talk about safe zones. These are moon areas where our agreement members work. They promise not to step on each other's toes. Let's call it to avoid harmful interference. It's like first come, first served. Okay, we're going to say this one more time. Each member is to give a heads up to its fellow members on their lunar plans, so there's no harmful interference. Plus, there's an option to shrink or expand these zones as needed. We'll still have to notify the UN Secretary-General just to keep things legit, at least on the surface, downplaying colonial ambitions a bit. In the last section, we'll once again outline the info about harmful interferences and possible zone expansions. And finally, to attract less tech-savvy countries, we'll hint that access to celestial bodies is free. Not clear if it's for everyone or just the agreement signatories. Oh well, we'll sort that out later. The Artemis Accords, led by NASA and the United States, have already scored more signatures than the 1979 agreement. Currently, 23 countries are on board, including tech giants like Japan, Singapore, the UAE, Israel, and the UK. So, on the one hand, this sounds cool and inspiring. All the countries are now getting into the actual terms of their space exploration, and this doesn't look sci-fi anymore. It means real politics. But there's a bunch of folks out there that just want to make some major profits while keeping the peacemaker researcher image. And I've got a feeling that in 10 years' time, the Accords of Artemis are going to be hitting the headlines of your regular political newsfeed. And let's not forget, any alliance first and foremost means keeping strangers at bay.
Three, two, one.
This may be news to some, but trade wars, like those going on between the United States and China, are all about either curbing competitive advantages or exerting some serious pressure. It's a game of weakening or squeezing. No one would willingly sell their most advanced technologies, at least not until you achieve a new level and you can get your outdated tech on the market. Now, hold up, globalization is still a thing. China and the United States were and are still doing business. It's just not the top-tier, cutting-edge stuff, you know? So, no need for anti-globalism vibes, please. But here's where it gets real. This containment logic is at play in a major arena: space. Well, let's talk about the US and its cosmic agenda first, and then about their space containment moves. Starting off with the White House stance. The United States is the world leader in space. A robust space program enables us to expand our alliances and partnerships and underpins our military strength. Space underpins our national security and ability to respond decisively to crises around the world. Space capabilities enable the US military to protect and defend the US homeland and to advance the national and collective security interests of the United States and its allies and partners. Now, the Department of Defense policy on space. The Department of Defense will recognize space as a priority domain of national military power that underpins multi-domain joint and combined military operations to advance national security. Protect and defend the use of space for U.S. national security purposes, the U.S. economy, and allies and partners of the United States. Conduct operations in, from, and to space, and deliver advanced space capabilities to deter conflict and, if deterrence fails, to counter and defeat aggression. Cooperate with other U.S. government departments and activities to act as a good steward of the domain. Sorry for interrupting here, but that literally says to act as a good steward. And here goes one more passage from the Artemis Accords. Leverage and promote a thriving domestic civil and commercial space industry, including expanding and increasing emphasis on innovative and emerging commercial space capabilities. There's a lot more meaningful quotes from other files and speeches to use, like Mike Pence's NASA speech praising the creation of Musk and Bezos. But I'm adding just one more. Already, NASA is working with industry leaders to develop plans for the Lunar Gateway, a critical outpost and refueling station that will help us develop the technologies, test the systems, and train the astronauts for the first ever crewed journey to Mars. And we've taken steps to make it possible for American entrepreneurs to invest and to help America develop the technologies that will carry American leadership into space. The reps of the White House and the Ministry of Defense are singing the same tune. Space is a big deal and they want to be good stewards of it. But, hint hint, they're also keen on establishing dominance on new territories, gaining resources and, let's be real, as the same old imperialism, rebranded with a wild mix of cutting-edge innovation, development, investment and entrepreneurship. And this ain't just some blogger's wild imagination. If they were pulling these moves on Earth, people might raise some eyebrows, but in space, how many countries besides the USA can even get there? And if we're talking self-made technologies, it's basically just one. China. This might sting for some Russians like it did for Dmitry Rogozin, the former head of the Russian NASA. Back in 2020, he caught wind of the United States cooking up some coalition for moon exploration before the Artemis Accords were even public knowledge. Rogozin wasn't thrilled, obviously. At the same time, he was spot on about the coalition's intentions, as well as its sidelining the UN. But this user's comment is just as right. Do you want your corrupted regime out there, on the moon? Yeah, fine, just go fly there first. Rogozin deleted his tweet, and it seems like Russia had a change of heart, even deciding to join the American cosmic cartel. Word is the US even extended an invite, but something went south and Russia missed the signing ceremony. Now, in 2024, it seems even less likely that Russia will sign the agreement. Let's talk Russia's role. The classic space race days between the USA and the USSR are long gone. But just like Americans are proud of Neil Armstrong, Russians hold Yuri Gagarin as a cosmic hero or an icon, like literally an icon. After the USSR crumbled, Russia's space industry hit some rough patches. Despite inheriting tech and talent from the Soviet Union, it faced a downhill slide. These days, Russian politicians are struggling not to lose the remaining tech and experts. In public PR campaigns, they're even trying to paint a picture of industry development. The glory days of Soviet cosmonautics are a distant memory now, and Russians watching the American space industry grow and prosper are feeling a bit like a leprechaun guarding its last pot of gold. Cooperation with the US after a long history of relationship where Russia's been constantly feeling belittled is a bit of a sting to the ego, but China, that's a different story. Now watch Russia take a step toward reclaiming its cosmic standing. Russia's been working on Luna 25, 26 and 27 since at least 2013, while China was on its Chang'e 6 and 7 projects. Both countries had been working on their own projects in parallel. Then, in 2020, those self-assured Americans kicked off the Artemis Program. Russia, feeling its sacred duty, needed to respond with something grand. A year later, Russia teams up with China on lunar projects in response to the US's Artemis Program. Everyone seems satisfied. And here's a fun fact. Last year, Russia launched Luna 25 to the moon's south pole. And it didn't end well, as the lunar lander crashed into the moon, making another grand entrance into the lunar missions. Meanwhile, a month later, India successfully landed its lunar space station, Chandrayaan-3, becoming the fourth country to touch down on the moon's surface. And the Indian mission cost $75 million, almost half the price of Russia's Luna 25 mission, which rang in at $134 million. Now, mark my words, in 15 years the space race will be fully on. And since competition is the engine of development, a united world ain't happening. There will always be clans, war and justice, even in space, and someone will always claim the cosmic throne. Well, and if you claim hegemony, then own up to it. The worst kind of imperialism is one that claims dominance but offers nothing but force and pressure. Such imperialism brings only destruction. Offer something creative, like the US with its moon access deal. Join the Accords, play by the rules, or fly solo without the hegemon's help. And who could forget China? In 2003, China became another space superpower that had its own manned program and achieved success in lunar and even Mars missions. Back in 2011, 13 years before this video, the United States shut the door on cooperation with China in space, and now the Pentagon's gearing up for Star Wars with China and Russia. It adds a new layer to our everyday life. Leadership on Earth, it seems, will depend on leadership in space.
We have created the envy of the world and will soon be landing on Mars and will soon have the greatest weapons ever imagined in history. I've already seen designs, and even I can't believe it. The United States has regained our place of prestige as the world leader. As has often been stated, you can't be number one on Earth if you are number two in space. And we are not going to be number 2 anywhere.
You know who to share this video with. We say a big thank you to our supporters on Patreon. And I'm the researcher.